Hey y'all, this video, I'm just going to tell you it has to do with race, with racial prejudice. This very strong subject for me, for most people. And this, obviously the subject goes way back. It originates way back before I was born. But I want to mention kind of a story. Well, there's a lot of stories I could mention about it, but I'd like to mention when I was younger. Actually, when I got saved about 15 years ago, I was at this little church. A couple little black guys sitting on a tailgate, and they talked to me about God, and I got saved at this little church. I'll never forget it. And so I'm kind of partial to, I guess, the subject of racism because I dislike it very much. Um, anyway, I get sidetracked easy, but there was a little guy, a little black guy I used to work with a long time ago at a place called Treadco in Orlando, Florida. And there was a guy there his name was Noble, and everyone called him King. Little old black guy, grumpy all the time. He didn't like anybody. And trucks would come. He'd been there 30, 40 years working at this place, and he'd hire a couple of young guys to work out. We called it the court outside where the truck tires when they'd pull up and they get tires put on. Well, King, he was this old guy, and he'd been there a long time, and he always carried these two wallets. One was he always says, I make $869 a month for my money from when I was in the war, and I got money in both pockets. And he goes, I don't bite my tongue, I say it like it is. And he just had this real real grumpy, real grumpy attitude, and he didn't like white people. He was, yeah, I don't like the white man holding us down, and very, but his roots go back to when slavery and all that kind of stuff was really relevant. And it's obviously racism still here today, but through the choice of the people that choose to keep it alive. But getting back on the subject, so he didn't like white people at all, and I don't think he liked anybody really. But he wore this big necklace, and it had from Africa, this big gold necklace, and so I worked on the court with him, and he'd been there so long that every morning he'd tell me to go get his Bacardi Light, his Winston's, and two lottery tickets at the gas station. And I'd worked with him for a couple of years, and so he worked in this thing called a tire cage, where he'd kind of go back in the back and he'd drink, and he'd be drunk by 9 o'clock in the morning. But he'd been there so long, and he always hired somebody. And even the management at this company, they kind of left him alone because he was like an old dog, and he'd been there so long. And the customers kind of had like a love hate relationship with him, kind of confusing situation, but everybody in one way loved him, but just kind of a grumpy, crotchety guy, And so they called me Rock. I used to be called Rookie. I was so small, and I'd try to step on the tires and break them down, and I didn't have any weight at all, and they called me Rookie for the longest time. When I got older, I just cut my name down to Rook on my name tag, and so King one day, drunk like always, he would he came out and he goes, Rook, I need you to. He said, I can't read your name tag. I'm gonna call you Rock, and he named me Rock, and so I had kind of a bond with him, and he'd be drunk and mad and aggravated every morning, but he liked me. I'd go get his lottery tickets and his Winston's and his Bacardi Light every day. And we built this relationship where I'd say, King, no, shut up, man. Just go back in your cage and go to sleep. And he'd be like, you shut your dang mouth and blah, blah, blah. And he'd give me a hard time, but he'd do this every day. But every day, I'd kind of look out for him so he wouldn't get himself in trouble. And he'd look out for me. He'd tell me, he'd say, Rook, no, you get out there and do that, but don't get yourself in trouble. You know, I can do that, but I don't want you to get yourself in trouble, Rock. And so he gave me that name, Rock. And there was something we had a something that's kind of hard to explain. We had a bond where he would yell at me every day, but I'd smile at him. I'd smile at him. I'd go, King, you hush and get back in your cage. You just hush. And he'd say, I don't care what you got to say. Get out there, blah 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 blah. And then after he'd yell at me, he'd go, no, I don't want you to get in trouble. and he'd wink at me. He couldn't even wink. Old guy. Well, we had this relationship built up, and we talked about race a lot. He mentioned it a lot, and I don't know if the video is about race so much as about maybe my friend King, but on that subject, I went to the hospital one day. I found out he was sick, and he died. He passed away, and I don't know what it was about King, but I love that man. He was one of my favorite people, and we had this relationship, and it was special. And I was at the hospital with his wife, who I'd never met, just her, just me, and well, actually, she was there with him. And I walked into the hospital, and the coolest thing that ever happened was his wife, who I'd never met. She walked up to me and she says, "Is you Rock?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she said to me, "Ooh, my noble loved you." And I remember feeling amazing that somewhere through well, I don't know how to explain it, but this thing that he carried with him probably most of his life, at least within our relationship, the period that we knew each other, that something came out of it. And if nothing else, if I left him before he passed away with the love, excuse me, that the love that I gave him, that only we understood, that maybe something in his heart changed, that he maybe recognized that love can be from any color, it can be from any walk of life. And I like to think that maybe I left his family with that feeling, or maybe him and his family, that I was there for him. And even at his funeral, um, really all I want to say is that I was happy to kind of maybe bridge a small gap somewhere in his life and in his family's life, in that way, that the special relationship that we had. And I just want to say to anyone out there, I know that a lot of bad stuff has happened in the past that none of us, we can't. I obviously had nothing to do with it, and we can't change it. But what we can do is, each person watching the video, we can take a minute to try to go out of our way to love, maybe in a way you normally wouldn't. Maybe just doing a nice thing for someone, maybe saying a nice thing for someone, and just kind of reaching out. Not really so much on the race card, but just in general, reaching out kind of in faith, and just showing somebody the love where you normally maybe no one else has. And just taking a minute to put their needs above yours. Like, if it's a friend like my friend in the hospital, and they're an hour away from your house, a lot of times this could go to even to a relationship. Just the fact, it doesn't matter even if you didn't care that much, just the fact that you took time. And everybody knows that the most important thing we have, the most important commodity we have as people, is our time. If you can take your time just to show up, just to let somebody know that their life and their problem was important enough for you to stop everything you're doing and dedicate your time and all of your attention to their problem, that it can make all the difference in the world. And I started the video talking about race, but I mean, it has to do with just really making yourself available for someone, if you maybe where no one else has. And I think that in that subject, the racist community, I guess you want to call it, I think it's as simple as deciding to love and to not hate, and not find a reason to be different. Why find a reason to hate anything? Especially the whole race thing. If you're in the hospital, black or white or whatever you are, You're not, if you're a kid, let's say you're a racist person, if your kid uh, is having surgery and he needs blood, and without that blood, you're going to lose your child. And you have a donor, and you're a white man, and there's a black man, and a black kid has the blood that your kid needs. You going to let your kid die? Or are you going to graciously accept the blood from the other person? Of course you're going to accept the blood. You know why? Because it's exactly the same. So, those of you out there that have an issue in this area, it's just dumb. It is. I mean, you're going to find in every crowd there's going to be in the African American community, there's going to be some real scumbags that do things that are really bad, and they've done something to hurt, one of your white friends. But you know what? They've done something to hurt their black friends, and the same goes for the black community. There's a lot of crappy white people out there that do a lot of crappy things, but it's the same reverse roles. What I'm saying is it's a case by case basis. And besides the obvious, situational things that happened years back, it's just not relevant. It's a choice. You choose to love or to hate. Just deciding you don't like someone based on a situation of how dark somebody's pigment is or how they look, if they're not attractive, or, when somebody says, how could that guy be with that girl? She's too, like, what do you mean, too what? No one's too anything for anybody else. All those things that you mention in that area are setting, like religion. It's making separation when there doesn't have to be one. There's no such thing as someone better than the other person in any way, ever. Now, there are different class of people. There's a class of people that decide to be contributors to society, and then there's a class that decide to take from society. Now, that there is a difference in that area, but that crosses over to both races. It really has nothing to do with race. The whole racism card is something we have developed to decide to be angry about or to separate and to not love. It all boils down to love. If you love, just like it says in the Bible to love, love has no fear, it's not boastful, it's not like true love. It's not self-indulgent, it's nothing but love. All it is you caring for someone else. All these separations that we like to bring up in the world to separate people, it's all fake. You either love or you don't. That's it. There's no in between that I love this kind of person. Well, then if you even make that statement, then you don't love to begin with. So yes, I don't like racism, or matter of fact, for that matter, I don't like minority. I don't like I don't like that we put relevance where there is none, and it's sad to me that we wouldn't just be happier not being separate. And this goes for both, not just both. I mean, all races, whether it's Hispanic, black, white, Asian. I don't know. There's tons of different races, but just love people. Try that. Yeah, there's different upbringings. There's different heritages. Sure, there are. I mean, there's differences. Differences are awesome. Differences are what make us better. If you were with the same exact kind of person every day of your life, that would be the most boring existence ever. There's got to be common ground where it matters. Like if husband and wife, if the guy's faithful and the girl's not faithful, that's not going to work very long. If one person is just a very violent person, the other one's docile, and they don't like confrontation, that's not going to work very long. I'm talking about differences that have nothing to do with a solid friendship or relationship. I mean, the good differences are, likes and dislikes. I like this kind of movie, you like this kind of movie, whatever. It's okay to have differences that are unimportant, but differences like race don't matter. I mean, yeah, there's complications that go with it, but ultimately, you either love or you don't love. So the whole idea of being of